Whether your beer is in a bottle, can, or glass, kick back and relax. It's Better on Draft.
Welcome, everybody. Episode 325 of the Better on Draft podcast. My name is Ken. Thank you so much for joining us. I truly appreciate it. It is a stormy few days we've been having here in Michigan with those flash floods, so hopefully everybody is getting their power back. They didn't lose too much in their refrigerators. But with that in mind, let's go around and see what everybody is drinking, starting with Dan. Dan, what do you got over there?
Oh, so I've got my go-to Speedway Stout, as always. Drink 4 or 5 of those today. I've got a Jeremiah Red from BJ's.
Awesome. And Wendy, what do you got over there?
I have a Tropical Hop Storm from BJ's and a Rochester Mills Milkshake Stout.
I feel like we're going to be drinking an infinite amount of Rochester Mills for the next year and a half. Just a little bit, that's for sure. We do have a special guest host with us today. Why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us where you're from and what you're drinking.
My name is Rob. I'm from Canton, Michigan. And today I'm drinking a Euphoric from Pure Project out in California.
For myself, I've got, that's all right. Sorry. I kind of like bull rushed right over you. Don't worry. We'll talk to you later. I got a Jeremiah Red from BJ's Brewhouse, as well as an Oktoberfest from BJ's Brewhouse. And I'd like to introduce our guest who's going to help talk to us about some of these beers, including those BJ's beers. Why don't you, our guest, introduce yourself, tell us who you are, who you work for, a little bit about yourself, the whole shebang.
All right. Thanks for having me. I'm Alex Puchner. I am the corporate brewmaster for the BJ's restaurant and brewhouse chain of restaurants and breweries. I have been brewing with BJ's for 27 years now. I'm responsible for getting them into the beer business. They existed as a small pizza chain before hiring me. And prior to that, I was involved with some of the first brew pubs in Southern California, where I'm based. So let's see, I've been in the early 90s. So I've been brewing professionally for 30 years and was a pretty crazy home brewer prior to that. So many years of brewing.
Well, let's hit on that before we get into the world of BJ's. As a home brewer in the late 80s, early 90s, how did you go about finding recipes, finding equipment, gathering all this information when, one, craft beer wasn't really necessarily that big, and two, obviously there's no internet or anything like that? Like, how did you go about becoming a crazy home brewer?
That was a very different time. Very different time. You know, we really didn't have much in the way of craft beer. Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. There weren't IPAs per se. There were hoppy pale ales, but you know, IPAs hadn't hit the scene yet. You know, you really couldn't find traditional European styles, you know, with much flavor, you know, other than Pilsner, unless you brewed them yourself. So that was the motivation, you know, and homebrewing was immensely popular back then. I joined the Maltose Falcons, who were very active back then. They still are, but you know, they were a homebrewing club in California before homebrewing was illegal in California. They've been around that long, and yeah, they taught me just an immense amount about brewing beer, just going to their monthly meetings. But I do have to credit Charlie Papazian and his complete joy of homebrewing with, you know, really inspiring me to stick with it. I think I probably brewed every recipe in that book from cover to cover. So that's how I got my start. And I had homebrewed for about 5 years before going professional. I had friends who were big fans of my beer. You know, my first few batches were not good, and I made many mistakes. I do remember that my first batch, and I brought a sample into a good friend of mine. We worked together. I brought it into his office, and we opened it, and you know, he gave it a good sip, and his response was, "Well, it's drinkable." So, we all got to start somewhere. And I was self-taught back in those days. There really, there weren't, most of the craft brewers back then were self-taught. Very few of them had gone to, brewing school at UC Davis or Siebel in Chicago. And it was a great time. My friends encouraged me to start brewing professionally as brew pubs started to pop up in California. And I made that plunge, in the early 90s and never looked back. Smartest thing I ever did.
Well, before I get into talking about the Jeremiah Red, on our Facebook page, a gentleman by the name of Todd Parker wants to say hi. Apparently, he's known as Caustic Todd to you, so you may know him, but he wanted to say hi. We know Todd very well, brewing over at the Rochester Mills Brew Pub over in Rochester Hills, Michigan. Todd has been a fan, has been on our show before, so he wanted to say hi.
Hi, Todd. Yeah, Todd and I go way, way back. Yeah, our first brewery was in Brea, in Orange County, and Todd was a regular there. And worked with us for a brief time. I think it was his first brewery job. How do you like that Jeremiah Red? It's not your average, red ale. It's very different.
I love I guess you could say I'm getting a little bit more like bread and biscuit in the front, which I kind of love that flavor. When I'm not getting any type of citrus or pine or anything like that, I'm getting just pure malt. But the Jeremiah Red, you were mentioning before we went live that this was probably your number one selling beer. Is that correct? Or
it is, depending on the market, but in some markets, warmer climates, Brewhouse Blonde, our Kolsch style beer is the top seller. But I can assure you that in Michigan, Jeremiah Red is the number one seller for BJ's.
Why do you think that a Kolsch or red is your number one seller when we kind of live in a world where those styles aren't necessarily the sexiest? They're not the IPAs, they're not pales, they're not even like dark beers like a stout. Like, why do you think a Kolsch or a red really outshine in sales the rest of your beer?
The Jeremiah Red has always surprised me, and it was really a hit from day one. It is the beer that really differentiates us, as it's unique. It's not an American style red because it's not balanced. You're right. It's not a hoppy beer. It's all about the malt. It's got, a dark fruit, raisiny, black cherry kind of maltiness to it. It is high alcohol, 7.3%. And, not balanced. If you're not a hoppy beer drinker, Jeremiah Red is for you. And, it's always stood out. That's one beer where we haven't touched that recipe over the years. 27 years now. It was one of our original 5 beers. Almost immediately won a medal at the Great American Beer Festival. Our guests went crazy over it. I was just trying to brew something different from the red ales I'd been brewing at brew pubs before BJ's, and I wasn't happy with them. So I thought, why don't I just try something of an Irish style red, but on steroids, much bigger, higher gravity, more alcoholic. And,
that's the thing that shocked me when I was reading the label, that it was over 7%. Because that's something that I could easily slam a growler of and not even bat an eye. I can't wait for Dan and Wendy for you guys to try that red ale when you get the opportunity to. But I am going to pass it off to Wendy though, because I think Wendy's got a few questions for you that she wants to ask.
So I actually have tried it, and it's one of my favorites. I'm also a big fan of the Quad.
The Quad, yeah. That was a seasonal beer. It's hasn't been on our lineup for a couple of years. Abbey Normal Quad, we call it. And that beer was formulated by our R&D director, Aaron Steck. He's based in Boulder, where we have our R&D brewery. And he does an incredible quad. I love that beer myself. Absolutely fantastic.
So before I get too far into the questions, I do have to say that I read on Wikipedia that the brewery started out as a Chicago style pizza place. You did mention pizza place earlier. Is there a big market for Chicago style pizza in California?
You know, it's more deep dish style. It's not true Chicago style. I lived in Chicago for a few years, and originally it was marketed as Chicago style. We recognize that it's got a lot in common with Chicago style pizza, but it's actually a more unique pizza in its own right. It's deep dish. We're famous for it, obviously, along with our beer and our dessert, our Pizookie.
Yes.
Definitely signature menu items along with our beer.
I have had the opportunity to visit BJ's in multiple states at this point. Sometimes just because of location where I'm at. But I'm curious, when you are, I'm sorry, what do you say to people who think because it's a corporate store that it's not really craft beer?
We do get that, and yeah, it bothers me. I guess what I say is, have you been to BJ's? Do you realize the variety of beer we have? We've got 12 signature beers and a couple signature seasonal beers on at any one time. We introduce new beers, we design new beers. Every few months there's a new seasonal beer, and this is craft beer, at its core, and that's what BJ's is all about. And we've been at it now for 27 years. We were pioneers back in the early days. We're survivors now, and still innovating, and we'd like to think that we're still pioneers today.
So one thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is that you've also won quite a few awards for your beer at different festivals, but most importantly at GABF. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, we take Great American Beer Festival very seriously, along with the World Beer Cup. Those are the two big ones. And we do pride ourselves in the number of gold medals we've accumulated over the years, and some in recent years. It's particularly ones in recent years that we're most proud of, because it is not easy to get an award at GABF these days. It's a tough competition, not just because there's so many entries compared to 10, 20 years ago, certainly, but American craft beer quality is absolutely world class these days. So to stand out amongst so many world class beers is extremely difficult these days.
I agree. So before I pass it over to Rob, I will say that, like I said, I've been to many of the different locations, and I've always really enjoyed the food. And I was looking at the website and saw that there was a beer dinner back in July, and I wondered, was that the first time you've done that, or is it something that you guys are planning to do regularly?
We do them regularly. Thanks for asking. That's something unique, the way we do them on a very large scale. We do them 5 times a year. The next one is a spooky Halloween themed beer dinner in mid-October. And it's a different theme for every dinner. This one features Stone Brewing. So it's a number of their beers, along with our seasonal pumpkin ale, paired with BJ's menu items. And we're very particular with the pairings. A lot of it is educational, not just about the beers, but pairing beer and food, a history of the brewery, whoever's featured, and it could be multiple breweries. We do a holiday themed dinner every December with our prime rib, and a number of holiday seasonal beers, winter warmers, that kind of thing. That's one of my favorites, so look for that one too. We do them at almost all of our restaurants. So about 200 restaurants. Average attendance is 50, depending on the capacity of the restaurants. Some might be smaller, some might be 100 or so. So across 200 restaurants, we're basically doing this beer dinner for 10,000 craft beer lovers every time we do it, which is pretty cool when you think about it. So yeah, another thing that's unique to BJ's, I think.
Well, you lost me at pumpkin beers for the spooky one, but I'm definitely going to look into the holiday beer.
Oh, you gotta have our pumpkin ale. That was one of our original seasonal beers, along with our Oktoberfest. So at least 25 years old. And yeah, we were one of the original. We weren't the original, but one of the original brewers of pumpkin ale. We have changed the recipe a little bit over the years. We didn't originally use real pumpkin in it. It was just all pumpkin pie spice and some caramelly malts. But yeah, now we actually use pumpkin puree, which adds some body and flavor to it on top of the pumpkin pie spice. I think you'll like it.
I'll give it a try. Rob, I know you have some questions.
Sure. I was just curious, do you find it difficult to have your own beers competing with your guest tap list, or just because they may have a wider audience that would be looking for them or anything like that? Yeah,
our guest beer selection is it's a number of national craft brands, Sierra Nevada, New Belgium, Stone, etc. But usually 6 to 8 of the guest beers on tap are local offerings, and we sell of our guest beers. That's what we sell the most of. That's what our beer drinking guests, many of them, are looking for, is something local. So we're happy to offer a selection of local beers on top of our own, and we end up just selling more beer.
Sure. And I was curious, I'm not super familiar. How many different places do you guys brew the beers, or is it like each location, or?
Yeah, our model is unique, and it's something we fell into. So we are not a brew pub chain, really never have been. We centralize our brewing operations. When I was hired, first as a consultant in 1995, BJ's had 8 little pizza joints and a terrible beer list. But the 2 guys that were running the company at the time, they hired me to get them into the craft beer business and pair handcrafted beer with deep dish pizza. Great idea. And because we had these existing restaurants, our first brewery was oversized, to supply those other restaurants. And then we had some growth plans. So it was a pretty large, brewing system, capacity of 5,000 barrels, for a brew pub. But we were shipping beer to the other restaurants, and we fell into this hub and spoke model, which really made sense. So for the next 10 years, we opened a brewery for every 10 or 12 or so restaurants, and operated that way. A brew pub chain that model is flawed. Once you get, beyond 20 or so brew pubs, it really isn't sustainable from a quality control perspective. It's an absolute nightmare, right? Your beer is only as good as your brewer. And also, it doesn't make sense to take up valuable dining space, with a brewery in every restaurant, and brewing equipment is expensive. So our model really made sense, and that's how we've done things, ever since. But now we've outgrown a lot of those older breweries. At one point, we were operating 11 breweries at one time, and we decommissioned a number of the smaller breweries. We still have several of them that we use for R&D purposes, and we have 2 large production breweries. One is a standalone brewery in Central Texas in Temple. And because of, our shipping beer both east and west, it's very central. Makes sense. And then we also have a brewery. Our first larger brewery is in Reno. So that's where, the beer you're enjoying there in Michigan is coming from. For the most part, Temple, and to some extent, Reno supplements the supply there. I should also add that Another thing that complicates our model is because we have liquor licenses, retail licenses. There are states that have tied house laws prohibiting us from shipping beer that we brew in our breweries into that state. So about a third of our production is brewed by two partners of ours, contract brewers that are brewing our brands for us for legal reasons.
Nice. Yeah, I was curious about that because if you brew in several places, quality definitely becomes an issue that it's hard to keep control of. Also, after you've said you've been there for 27 years, in many years, you've definitely brewed a few batches of beer. Do you have any particular favorites that were maybe one-offs or something that doesn't get brewed anymore that you'd bring back?
Well, I'm a huge Belgian ale fan, and another thing that differentiated BJ's more so in the early days was we had a Belgian ale list. A list of my favorite Belgian ales, and then of course we've started brewing our own Belgian ales over the years, and one of my all-time favorites of our beers is our Grand Cru, which is our holiday seasonal. It's a strong golden Belgian, spiced with a little orange peel and coriander, and you may have had it. It's we released it in early November. It's available through the holiday season, and that's one we first brewed it to celebrate the new millennium. So this will be the 24th year we brewed it. We thought it was just going to be a one-off, and it was such a huge hit. We brought it back every year. First is kind of to celebrate the new year, and we tap it New Year's Eve, and then we realized, well, it's a celebratory beer. We're missing out on sales. Let's tap it earlier. So now we tap it in November to enjoy, Thanksgiving and through the December holidays and into the new year. I love this stuff, so I can't wait. We've just been brewing the production batches for this year and just bottled. We bottle it in a cork and cage 750 to sell out of our restaurants where we can sell beer to go. And that's also a big hit too. So we actually just bottled it because of bottle conditions. We have to get way ahead of it. Just bottled it 2 days ago. So I'm excited to start sampling the bottles in a few weeks.
Very nice. Look forward to that. I'll pass it back to Wendy while we're waiting for Dan.
I actually have had that one, and I brought it home with me last year. I won't lie. Let's see. Your California breweries currently have a Brewhouse beer club for only $30 bi-monthly. With the 5th BJ's in our state, is there any possibility it'll come to Michigan?
There is a good possibility. Yeah, we've stuck to California for the first 2 years. Big state for us. We have many restaurants there, but Michigan is definitely a state we have when we do expand the club. The state that we're planning on. It's kept our brewers very busy and very motivated to create new beers, because every 2 months there are 2 releases, and one is a more sessionable style of beer in cans, and then the other is a bottle conditioned 750 that is typically something strong, maybe something a little crazy, something more like a new beer experience, and you might want to cellar it, but definitely something you want to sip and savor. So we've had a lot of fun with that, and we have a lot of beers that we brewed over the years that just we knew wouldn't sell well enough to put on tap at BJ's. So we have all these these recipes, and they've been perfect for the beer club. And of course, we're creating new recipes all the time. So that's been a lot of fun.
I'm a huge fan of stuff like that. I have more memberships than I care to admit. Speaking of breweries in Michigan, I hear that Grand Rapids is going to open in October.
Yes. So we have 4 BJ's in Michigan now. And Grand Rapids will be our 5th. It's coming soon. I would love to get out there. I've never been to Grand Rapids, and that's a good craft beer town from what I hear. You got a few good breweries there, right?
That leads to my next question. Is there any hesitation about opening a brewery in Beer City, USA? I say Beer City, USA.
Okay. Maybe that's why it took us a few years to open in Grand Rapids. No hesitation at all. We know there's a lot of craft beer drinkers there, and of course we'll have a great selection of Founders beers, Perrin, New Holland, Shorts, whatever. I'm even a fan of, isn't Virtue Cider nearby? Yeah, it's good cider, so we'll even have that on tap.
Yeah, Virtue Cider, Greg Hall's spot over there. We had him on the show a few years ago. But yeah, you can, there's a lot of hard cideries here in the state of Michigan, as well as, if you're unfamiliar, of course, on the east side is Ferndale, Michigan, which is Mead City, USA. So if you're a big mead drinker, Schramm's, Bee Nectar, plenty of great meaderies out here as well.
Yeah, I've had Bee Nectar. Bee Nectar is very good. Yeah. You mentioned Greg Hall. We go way back. I took a short course in quality control at the Siebel Institute in Chicago years ago. This was before BJ's, and I was a brew pub brewer. And Greg Hall was my lab partner in that class. It was a 2-week course. And I've known him, boy, this would have been close to 30 years ago. I've known him that long.
That's amazing. So I am actually drinking the Tropical Hop Storm, and I wanted to ask you about it. Tell us a little bit about the beer.
Yeah, we're excited about this beer. So this was just released as a seasonal beer last week. We have our regular IPA is called Hop Storm, and it's somewhat old school. It's not an in-your-face, West Coast style or juicy or dank IPA. It's fairly tame and friendly by today's IPA standards. So we wanted to introduce an IPA that has more of a tropical, contemporary, juicy hop profile to it. It took us about a year to design this beer. I think 5 test batches, a number of different hop varieties that contribute, tropical fruit aromas and flavors. Think papaya, passion fruit, definitely some pineapple in there. We even use a little Sabro hop to contribute a hint of coconut. I don't know if you're picking that up, but and there's also an experimental hop in there, YQH 1320, that we're crazy about, that has all kinds of different tropical flavors in it. So our brewing team is really proud of this beer. I have to give our R&D director, Aaron Steck, a lot of credit for brewing so many test batches, until we perfected, this beer. It ended up being exactly what, we were looking for. It's only been on tap at BJ's for a week now. We've been getting very positive feedback, which is encouraging. We're selling more of it than we projected. So I'm stoked. We're really proud of it. So I'm glad you're enjoying it too.
Definitely.
And in fact, I have our Tropical Hop Storm shirt on here, rather loud. But, I just got this, and if you'd like, well, we'll do this. We will ship each of you a Tropical Hop Storm shirt from BJ's, and
Nice.
Yeah.
Not to slam on other breweries, but those are easily a very much more loud shirt than just the logo that we normally get with a craft beer shirt. So I definitely will take it because I will wear it
Absolutely.
for sure.
My wife just saw it and took one look, and it's like, you look at it, you got to be kidding me. Yeah, we get that kind of reaction.
Oh, have a little fun. Rob, did you want to jump in there?
Sure. I did kind of come up with a question while I was sitting here listening. from my own experience of working with Jolly Pumpkin, you guys do one-offs, and you said that you kind of brew in a few central locations. Do you ever have issues with trying to get like one-off beers or something different to be released all at the same time in all of your locations, or?
Yes, we do run into those issues. It can be problematic. We tried it, with our new seasonal beers, there is a tapping date, and for one reason or another, and it can be logistics. Our logistics are ridiculously complicated with the number of markets, we ship to, or we run into, a production delay for one reason or another, a stuck fermentation, who knows? We've had every issue imaginable that might hold up, shipping a batch, and that happens. It's it's part of the job. Yeah, and luckily, because we're brewing the beer in multiple locations, if we can't get it, if one brewery can't supply where we had planned to supply, we can usually reconfigure the shipping plan, just to ship some beer from another brewery, at least to get beer where it needs to be for the launch date, and then fill in that gap when the batch of the other brewery is ready, right?
Sounds good. And then also another thing I was wondering is, how is it that you balance beer trends over the course of time? Especially now that you have a national exposure as opposed to being just a local restaurant chain.
Yeah, we do have our two flagships, the blonde and the red, as I mentioned, but the rest of our signature beers, many of them have been around for decades, and they're somewhat old school, like our Piranha Pale Ale and our Hopstorm IPA. We did revise the recipe for our Piranha Pale Ale, which was modeled after Sierra Nevada. It was all Cascade originally, because that was my favorite beer at the time. But now we've added some other hop varieties to it, some Citra and Simcoe, and it's a more complex, more fruity, more hop forward beer than it used to be. So we do change our recipes, but also we constantly introduce new beers, particularly with our seasonal lineup. And if something's very popular, it'll be around in our seasonal lineup for a few years at least. But then it falls out of favor. For example, we have a wit beer that was a super popular summer seasonal for about 10 years. We call it Nitwit, and then we just stopped selling as much. And we realized, what, it's run its course. Let's do something else, as a summer seasonal. And this year we did a Mexican style lager. We call it Curavesa. And that will be our summer seasonal for a number of years, I'm sure, until Mexican lagers fall out of favor, right? So yeah, you've got to keep up with the trends. And, of course, we're even looking at Beyond Beer. And, initially, I really didn't want anything to do with, brewing hard seltzers or anything that wasn't, malt-based. But I've certainly come around and really embraced it, because it's been a real learning experience for our brewing team. And I think we're brewing Beyond Beer beverages that, will help differentiate us, because they're not just another, Me Too seltzer or Me Too, hard lemonade. We've got a really unique hard lemonade that we have launched across California, Arizona, Nevada, and you'll see it in Michigan at some point next year. We'll go chain wide with it. It's full of flavor. It's higher alcohol, and just super, super refreshing. So it's got prickly pear in it, along with some lemon and raspberry juice. It's fantastic. And we're also, starting to experiment with hard teas, because that's such a hot category too. And again, there we want to do something, unique, something different from the other hard teas out there.
And talking about hard teas and seltzers, do you have any idea of going to like an NA beer or anything like that, or just do it as a guest tap?
Yeah, we have been experimenting with NA beer for a couple of years now. In fact, we were testing it on tap, NA versions of 3 of our most popular beers: the Jeremiah Red, the Brewhouse Blonde, and our Piranha Pale Ale. And we were really happy with the product, but we just weren't selling enough to justify, a beer line for it, having it on tap. That category is continuing to grow, as you know. So, maybe we were a little ahead of our time. I don't know. But we plan on continuing to pursue that category. And I find at my age, I'm drinking, more and more NA beer. Just because I can't handle as much alcohol as I used to. And NA beer has gotten so much better, than it used to be. We were using vacuum distillation for a while. We're starting to experiment now with arrested fermentation. It's a more cost-effective way to make NA beer, and we're hoping we can get just as good a product that way. But it's a great learning experience. So yeah, we're having a lot of fun with that category too.
Nice. Do you have anything to add, Ken?
Yeah, with regards to the NA beer, obviously having been in the industry for so long, the flavors of even your mainstays, your Labatt NAs, your Bud Double O's, like these beers don't taste like what they tasted like even 10 years ago, let alone today. Or my palate's completely changed. Let's get a little bit about you. What are some of your favorite NAs to crush while you're taking a break between beers?
You get athletic beer there? Yeah.
Yes, we do.
I would say they have absolutely set the standard. Absolutely. I mean, everything they've done is fantastic. And another beer NA that really impresses me is Guinness. You taste the NA Guinness side by side with the draft Guinness, and it is really hard to tell the difference. That's pretty remarkable. And I will tell you that Heineken 0.0 is a fantastic NA beer too. Another one where it's really hard to tell that it's an NA beer. I don't drink a lot of Heineken, but that's an extremely well-made NA beer.
Yeah, as we got into a more national audience due to COVID and not being in a studio over in Metro Detroit, we actually had Athletic Brewing on. Both John and Bill hopped onto our show to talk about it. And I believe Bill was in San Diego at the new facility. And we got like a visual tour of the new facility. And it is ridiculous what they're doing. But they're doing it right. Now, you also said you had kind of like a hesitation within seltzers. And I think a lot of people felt the exact same way when they saw the seltzers like Truly and even like Milk Ultra seltzers. They're like flavor-ish seltzers, not flavorful. Have you had the opportunity to try any of the more larger flavorful seltzer styles like Untitled Art or Holmes or even Oddside here in Michigan?
Yeah, I have not. But we have similar seltzers in Southern California where craft brewers are. Yeah, they're embracing that big flavored seltzer with more alcohol. Not a better for you kind of seltzer like Truly or White Claw by any stretch. It's full of sugar. But those are selling very well, and we have a number of those on tap as guest beers in our restaurants, and they're doing very well. Yes. Yeah. So I think that's the direction that hard seltzer is going. It's good to see.
Well, staying on the same line, craft beer to go has always been like a staple for breweries. Like breweries have been able to, sell their beer outside crawlers, growlers, especially crawlers now with crowler machines being so, standard in a lot of breweries. But you're starting to see with the competition of hard seltzers, hard teas, hard lemonades, craft cocktails to go, where people can buy RTDs or even, mixed at the bar cocktails to go. Do you see that eating into your beer sales at all? Or do you really see like a separation of competition between the two styles of alcoholic drinks?
Well, if anything, it's helping our to-go sales, because we are selling margaritas out the door where we can do it, and Yeah, it's interesting. If there is a silver lining to the pandemic, there were a number of states where, large states where before COVID, we couldn't sell beer out the door. So, whereas we were selling 6-packs to go in California, we couldn't do it in many other states like Texas and Florida, where we have a number of restaurants. And, first it became a temporary privilege, to help restaurants survive the pandemic. And then it became permanent. So, we are now selling the 6-packs out the door, along with, we have crowler machines in some of our restaurants, but they're hard to maintain. When you have 215 restaurants, 215 crowler machines would be a challenge. So, we prefer to sell 6-packs out the door in bottles, our 750 ml bottles, along with cocktails. Why not?
Well, you mentioned 215 stores. I think Rob kind of touched on it. Like, quality control is definitely key. I read I believe, Joshua Knoll book about the Anheuser-Busch buyout of Goose Island. Barrel-aged stouts and selling out, I think, was the name of it. And one of the things in that book is they talk about brewing Goose Island 312 at the AB New York facility and how they just could never get it right. How do you manage different water styles, going from like maybe well water to river water to tap? Like, how do you manage all of this so that the Jeremiah Red that I get from Reno tastes the exact same as the Jeremiah Red from one of your California facilities, tastes the exact same as the Texas facility? How do you, since you're the senior VP, like, manage all of that quality control?
That's a great question. It's not easy. And, it's not just our breweries. We're managing, how our beers are made at 2 contract brewers too. We have very regular taste panels, blind taste panels, where we taste samples of each beer from all the breweries where it's brewed, and also draft versus canned. We find differences, and we work to make sure those beers are more consistent the next time we have a taste panel. So that's one way. You mentioned the water, which is absolutely critical. Water chemistry is so different from one city to another, and also in some locations, we used to brew in Arizona. The water was a blend of 40 different wells at any one time. That blend would change, not just from month to month, but even from day to day. So you don't know what you're brewing with. So how do we solve that problem? Well, we have RO systems in all of our breweries. So so we strip everything out of the water first, and then depending on what style we're brewing, we'll add minerals back in, soft or hard water, whatever we're looking for that style of beer. But yeah, that's saved us, is RO systems.
And for people like me who that phrase goes over my head, what's an RO system?
Oh, reverse osmosis. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I know those words. I just don't know what R.
Yeah. All right.
That's one of those where I didn't catch the acronym.
Yeah.
Before we kind of end the show, we end the show with something nice, lighthearted. We're going to ask you a final question. I do have one question, and that is this Oktoberfest. This is a German style lager. This is brewed at 5.6%. I do see it's brewed in Temple, Texas. It says it right on the can. It's got the nice little independent logo on there. So for you craft beer fans who are trying to be all high and mighty about BJ's over here, this beer is so damn good. What is, give me a little rundown of the Oktoberfest. What am I tasting? What am I, feeling? Oh my God, this is so good.
Thank you.
Kind of had a loss for words, but yeah. So this isn't a Marzen, correct? This is an Oktoberfest style beer.
Well, they're somewhat interchangeable.
Okay.
The history is that the festival, the Oktoberfest festival, precedes the beer Oktoberfest, and Marzen, because it was tapped, in September, traditionally, lagered all summer long, brewed in March, which is what Märzen means, and then tapped in September, the beginning of the new brewing season. It became, a natural to drink Oktoberfest, that Märzen style beer at the Oktoberfest festival. So it became, the official beer of Oktoberfest, and is often, called Oktoberfest beer. But it is basically Märzen, though. There are Oktoberfest style beers that are paler than your typical Märzen. So there's two versions of Oktoberfest, one that is, an amber, similar to Märzen, and one that is a paler style of Oktoberfest. Ours is a more traditional style, also somewhat a little bit of an American style Oktoberfest, because it's a little hoppier, not a hoppy beer, but a little more balanced with the hops than a traditional Bavarian Oktoberfest would be. But I love this style. This is one of our original seasonal beers, along with the pumpkin ale. It is our top selling seasonal beer, though Tropical Hop Storm might overtake it. We'll see. And this is another beer that we just launched last week. We I think we launch it earlier and earlier every year. So well ahead of Oktoberfest season, which starts next month. But I just love this beer, and I took home a 6-pack last night, and I'm sure it'll be gone by the end of the weekend.
Is there a reason why I can't have this style of beer year round?
Well, look for Märzen. Now, there are brewers that make a Märzen year round, and it's close enough. Yeah.
All right. Well, as we end the show, of course, each and every week we end with a final question, give you the opportunity to, of course, plug the upcoming BJ's in Grand Rapids, Beer City, USA, officially by some website, and it's been proclaimed, therefore it is true. So I'm going to actually start with myself for the final questions, because usually I end the show. But I have one more question that I have wanted to ask you since you started talking. And was there ever a beer that you made that you had high hopes for that it just didn't take, whether it's with your audience or craft beer fans at one of your other brew pubs?
Yes, I mentioned that I'm a big Belgian ale fan, and I was drinking sour beers long before they, became popular in the U.S. And I recall brewing an Oud Bruin, a Flemish sour brown that was just we couldn't begin to sell. It was way ahead of its time. We had a brewery in Portland back in the day, so this was at least 20 years ago. And no, trying to sell a sour beer in the U.S. at that time, I don't know what I was thinking.
Could you give it a go now?
Oh yeah, no, we have. Yeah, it's definitely. I'm still a huge fan of sour beers. And we brewed a number of them over the years. We did a collaboration, in fact, last summer with New Belgium. They taught us a lot about how to brew sour beers, especially on a larger scale. Because, we shipped it to all of our restaurants, so that was a really neat experience.
I believe New Belgium, along with Pure Jolly Pumpkin with Ron Jeffries, and of course Jester King down in Texas.
Yeah, I know Ron. He's awesome. What a talented brewer. And I gotta ask you, can I ask you something real quick?
Of course.
I almost forgot. So I have a connection with a brewery there. This was in my early brew pub brewing days before BJ's. Does the name Drew Ciara ring a bell, or Royal Oak Brewing Company? So
Royal Oak Brewing Company still up and existing.
I brewed the first batches at that brewery, and the connection is that Drew Ciara, who I think started that brewery with his brother-in-law, he was the general manager at the brew pub in Huntington Beach that I brewed at, my first brewing gig. And then he moved to Michigan, after he got married, where his wife's family is from, and started Royal Oak Brewery and a few others in the area, I believe. But anyway, he had hired a young brewer who, at the time didn't have a lot of experience. Wayne Burns is his name. He's a successful brewer in Colorado these days. But anyway, he said, "Yeah, Alex, come on out and help Wayne with the first round of batches. He's going to need your help." So, I was there. We brewed nonstop, barely any sleep. We brewed nonstop for like 4 days. pretty crazy. But
yeah, the Royal Oak Brewery actually brought home gold for their Kolsch last year. Jeremy Altier is their current head brewer. They do own 3 breweries. That's the Rochester Mills Brew Pub, where your friend Todd Parker is the head brewer over there. The Royal Oak Brewery and the Detroit Beer Company. So that's where Dave Ciora is still making his mark here in brewing in Michigan. 100% in 2 months or a month and a half when you go to GABF. Make sure also used to own. Todd's trying to correct me here. Make sure when you go to GABF this year, should you go try the Kolsch from from the Royal Oak Brewery. Jeremy Altier will probably be there as well. Phenomenal brewer. I can't talk enough, but what they do still at the Royal Oak Brewery is their Kolsching hour, where they serve Kolsch like Kolsch should be served. And one of our fans, Mary, is saying that she'll be there tomorrow, I believe, for the Kolsching hour. So that was my question. Wendy, what's your final question for Alex here?
So, as many of our listeners know, I love to travel. What is the one reason that I should come to BJ's?
one reason, well,
Well, you can give us a couple if you want, but at least one.
Well, yeah, I would absolutely, say the beer, but not just, one beer. You've got to sample the variety of beer we offer. And I think, we have something for everyone. Get a flight, start with a flight, sample everything you can. 2 flights is perfect. And definitely pair it with, a BJ's deep dish pizza, one of our sandwiches, one of our entrees. We on a pale ale, pair it with our New Orleans jambalaya. Can't beat that. So perfect place to pair beer and food.
Wendy's laughing because I am a anti-flight candidate. I believe flights should be abolished in breweries. We actually did one of those polls on Instagram. Ed decided to do that, and 30% of people agree with me, which I was actually kind of shocked that 3 out of 10 people agree that we need to get rid of flights
Because they only drink 1 or 2 styles of beer.
I drink plenty of styles of beer. I just don't see usually many styles of the ones that I like. When's the last time you went to a brewery and you saw an ESB, an English mild, a brown, a red? Like you see IPA. I'm not going to see that at BJ's though, because goddamn, these two, the Oktoberfest and the Jeremiah Red. I'm going to the Livonia one tomorrow to get a growler of the red to go.
That's what I want to hear. All right.
Rob, what's your final question?
My final question is just going to be, how many states do you guys have locations in, and what's the next state that you plan on entering?
Yeah, we're in 30 states now. The newest state being Illinois. We're finally in the Chicago market, Orland Park, not far from you. And the next one will be, the next state is Wisconsin. We're opening in Brookfield there. That'll be our first opening next year. I think in April of next year. So, yeah, Wisconsin's next. Yeah,
very nice.
Yeah, we like it in your neck of the woods. They drink a lot of beer.
They sure do.
All right, Alex Puchner. Where can they find BJ's? Is there like an online website? Is there social media? What's the details about Grand Rapids upcoming? Give us the rundown before we go.
Yeah, if you're not sure where there's a BJ's location, go to our website. There's a location locator. Just type in your city or state. Website is bjsrestaurants.com. And Grand Rapids is not our next opening. We're opening in Rochester, New York, in a month or two in September. And then in October, early October, we open in Grand Rapids. That'll be our last opening this year. I want to get to Grand Rapids. I have never been. Let me know if you'd like to be there for our soft opening. And I'll make sure we take care of you, and I may even join you there.
We hope to see you there, and we'll be there to help you to take a little Grand Rapids tour.
Absolutely.
And get some of the nice spots out there. That is going to do it. Better on Draft 325. Of course, like us on all social medias. That's TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Untapped, YouTube, Kick, Twitch, Twitter. Everything is at Better on Draft, because no matter what you think of your beer, we think it's Better on Draft. Have a good night.
Cheers.
Cheers. Prost.